Well, to talk more about this, let's bring in our Europe editor, Armen Georgian. Armen, first of all, why is Moldova so important to Russia's strategy?
Well, remember some months ago, Jeannie, the Russian military was talking about creating a land corridor from southern Ukraine to Transnistria, which is this breakaway Russian-speaking region in Moldova. And that obviously caused a lot of concern in Moldova and in the European Union. But that was before Ukraine's armed forces made progress in the south, recaptured Kherson and so on. So if there was such a plan to create this land corridor with the Russian army stretching all the way from Ukraine to Transnistria, that is probably on the back burner now. As you said earlier, Russia is now focusing on this offensive in the Donbass. But certainly Transnistria, you can see that territory there on our map. It remains for Russia a kind of counterweight to Moldova's pro-Western ambitions, because both the EU and NATO don't like to admit countries that have disputed territories, conflicts on their own territories, and so forth. So it just as these breakaway regions in Georgia, Abkhazia, South Ossetia, act as a kind of counterweight to Georgia's pro-Western ambitions. So Transnistria, in a sense, fulfills that role when it comes to Moldova from the Kremlin's perspective. Note that Moldova is actually not a candidate for NATO, but it is a candidate for the European Union.
Armen, we're coming up now on the first anniversary of the Russian invasion into Ukraine. How has Moldova been affected by the war?
Well, the refugee influx was the big thing. So the first couple of months, especially in March and April, Moldova was seeing per capita influx of refugees that was bigger than any other European country. And that was in a country, Moldova, that has some of the lowest living standards in Europe. So that was one of the things that drove Moldova to closer cooperation with the European Union. It made a deal with the EU to get more financial assistance to host those refugees. The big thing then was the actual formal application by Moldova to join the European Union in March of last year, and it was granted candidate status in June. So there are still ongoing assessments now by the European Commission of where Moldova is heading with all of that. When it comes to NATO, Moldova doesn't, as I said, it's not a candidate, but at the June summit in Madrid, NATO offered an enhanced security and assistance package for Moldova to help it modernize its armed forces. And just just this week, the new Prime Minister of Moldova, Dorin Recian, announced that boosting Moldova's defense capability would be one of his big priorities now, because Moldova is seen as having a relatively weak military. By the way, the Kremlin will have put those two things together. The fact that on the one hand, NATO offered this extra assistance package to Moldova in June, and the fact that now the Moldovan Prime Minister is announcing a boost in Moldovan defense capacities, because obviously more Moldovan defense logically means more NATO involvement in Moldova. That will have not escaped the Kremlin's attention. But all of this is going to be a tricky road for the Moldovan political establishment to navigate, because on the one hand, it is committed to this pro-Western integration, particularly with the EU, and at a slower pace with NATO. At the same time, don't forget that Moldova is constitutionally neutral. It's been neutral since 1994, therefore it cannot formally be part of a military alliance such as NATO.
Armen, thanks for that. France 24's Europe editor, Armen